Hey guys, so this week I got to talk with Chuck Gill, who is one of the most prominent leaders in our industry. He has dedicated countless hours to volunteer and lead at tennis associations. I met Chuck at my first USPTA conference back in 2014. I remember that conference because it was when the USPTA first announced their U30 initiative, which was meant to encourage and help subsidize young pros to attend different conventions. And I remember Jason Gilbert from USTA Florida gave us these super bright t-shirts, us being the younger pros who would be a part of the initiative that were also there at the conference. And I remember we had to stand up in this conference room with our t-shirts on, and I was the only girl. And I remember thinking, wow, this really needs to change. Now, Chuck is such a great example and role model for tennis pros. We talked about his career, the differences between running public facilities and private clubs, changes that are occurring in our industry, what it is like to serve as USPTA president, and so much more. I even asked him about what is going on with the USTA accreditation, now switching from the USPTA to the PTR. But before I let you go and listen to the episode, I would like to invite you again to visit our website at vidatennispodcast.com. As I have mentioned in previous episodes, I've been working on improving the site, and I'm finally somewhat happy with the look of it. So please check it out. If you would like to support the podcast, you can leave a review or share our content with someone who you think would benefit from it. You can also make a donation or purchase our merch directly from the website. Okay, without any further ado, get ready to learn from one of the best out there, only here at Vida Tennis. Enjoy! Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vida Tennis, the podcast for those of us who eat, sleep, breathe tennis. Today, I'm so excited to talk with Chuck Gill. Chuck is the director of tennis at the Wellington Tennis Center, and he was president of the USPTA and USPTA Florida, and he's currently serving as president-elect for USTA Florida. Chuck is the ultimate director, having directed for the club at Ibis in West Palm Beach for 24 years and the Boca Raton Resort and Club for 7 years before that. He's from Richmond, Virginia, and I also hear that Chuck is an avid golfer and parrot head in his free time. Welcome, Chuck, to Vida Tennis. Did I get all of that right?
That's really good. You did your homework. And I would say that I'm a 100% parrot head. And while I'm a little bit of a golfer, I wouldn't say avid golfer, but I love to play golf for sure.
Tennis through and through, right?
Tennis mainly.
Nice. Okay, so I want to hear your tennis story, how you got into teaching tennis to start with. So did you always know that you wanted to teach tennis?
You know, I did actually. I really liked, when I was growing up, I played all the other sports, right? I played basketball, I played baseball, and my father was a good tennis player. So my father taught me to play. And I really wanted to play a sport in college. I really wanted to, play some sport in college, and it didn't look like basketball was going to be the sport that I would be able to play at that level. But when I started playing tennis, I really enjoyed it, and I really liked to work hard at it. And I think being involved in other sports actually made me a good tennis player for a number of reasons. Number one, the other sports, you learn teamwork and you learn discipline, and you really learn how to compete. And, I brought that through to tennis. And the other thing that I think helped me as I hit that age of 16, 17, 18 is because I hadn't played tennis since I was 8 years old. Everything was new to me, and my learning curve became very quick. And I had no burnout factor because the whole sport was so new to me. I certainly didn't get burned out at all. As a matter of fact, as I entered college and I wound up playing at a Division II school, I got really, really interested in really trying to work on it. As far as teaching, when I was in college, we would all go have jobs teaching tennis at summer camps. So all of my teammates and I would trek up to New England, and we would get jobs at different summer camps. And so when I started teaching, I really learned that I enjoyed coaching and I liked it.
That's awesome. Not a lot of people get that until later. And so you basically started playing tennis later when you were 16, right?
Well, I knew how to play tennis. My father and I would go out and hit. And so when I was 12, 13, I really
Okay.
started to play seriously. So it wasn't like I would play all the time because I played all the other sports up until about 16. And about 16 is when I really just played tennis only. And that's when I just said, look, this is going to be my sport. I really need to work on this and play this. This has got to be my 12-month-a-year sport.
And you are now at a public facility, and we had kind of talked about this offline because before you went to Wellington, you were at these country clubs, and now you're at a public facility. Can we talk a little bit about what differences you see and how which one do you like better and how are they different?
Well, I would say that now at this point in my life, I love my public tennis center now. I would say that I enjoyed being at private clubs when I was there. I could say that there's some similarities and there are also some differences. And the similarities, coaching is coaching. You're trying to make people better and you're trying to run programs. I think the similarities are they're both very service driven. You have to really focus on service, whether or not it could be a club member who might be paying $30,000 a year in dues, or it could be a permit holder that's paying $600 a year for the right to play at the public tennis center, or it could just be the person walking in off the street. I think I try to teach all of my coaches, and I try to really make sure that everybody on my staff understands wherever you're at, it's all about service. It's all about whether or not you can connect with customers and provide good experiences. So in that case, it really coaching is coaching, and you're trying to get people to be better, and you're really focusing on service. So I would say those are big similarities. Yeah. I would say the main differences are in private clubs, generally people can be a little more demanding. Not that we don't have demanding people at my public tennis center, that we certainly do at times, but I'd say the expectation levels are a little bit different. Obviously, if you're spending $30,000 a year in dues and $80,000, $100,000 in initiation, your expectation on what you get is going to be a little different. So the expectation levels are a bit different. And I do think that public tennis centers are a great place to grow the game and to grow the sport because you can be more inclusive. You're not limited to servicing a relatively small demographic or a relatively small group of players. But when you're at a public tennis center, everybody's your customer and you want to be welcoming. And we've tried to set the tone at Wellington that we want everybody to feel like it's their tennis center. If you're a coach and you're traveling with a player and you've got a tournament in Boca, but you happen to be staying in Wellington with friends, we want to be your tennis center. We want to be the place that you feel comfortable coming in and hitting with your kid. If you're just trying to learn tennis and take it up, we want to be inclusive of everybody. And I think that's the big difference in a public tennis center is you really have a lot more bandwidth. You can host tournaments. You can take in outside people. You don't have to worry about if you're a member. Everybody's a member at a public tennis center, and everybody has the right to come and play tennis. And that feeling of being inclusive is really important to me. And after being at a private club, candidly, it's kind of refreshing to just know that the doors are open, and if you're here to play tennis and you like playing tennis, we're going to be a place for you to play.
Yeah. And do you have any crazy stories about, I don't know, having to meet a member's expectations that were really high at a club where you were or anything like that? I mean, or maybe we can just talk about what those expectations can be for some of those clubs.
Sure. I think at private clubs, we used to have a wonderful general manager, Mr. Steve Logodice at Ibis, and he and I worked together for about 15 years. And, when he used to give staff orientations, he used to say, how many of you like steaks or how many of you like to eat? And everybody would raise their hand. And he goes, well, what would you think if you were going to a restaurant and to go to that restaurant, you had to pay $100,000 initiation and you had to pay $20,000+ in dues, and you were going to eat at that restaurant that you paid for the right to eat there? You'd probably expect a really, 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 really good meal. Mm-hmm. And so I think generally private clubs because they charge dues in order to use the facility, I think the expectation levels across the board are really high. Again, private clubs, people tend to think that because they're members, they're the only members. And a lot of times, you've probably experienced that yourself. You go, I should be this, I should get the court anytime I want because I'm a member. Well, that's nice that you think that, but the reality is we only have about 500 other tennis playing members that all paid the same as you. And, you've got to reset the expectation level so that they realize that they're not the only fish in the sea and that you have to run programs. And, sometimes you don't get the 8:30 tee time and you don't get the 9 o'clock court time and you don't get the 6:30 seat at dinner. Everybody's the same. So while everybody has high expectations, I think it's, sometimes it just needs to be reeled in a little bit that everybody's the same and we're all trying to provide the same experience for everyone. As far as specific, I probably have my share of just plain batshit crazy stories about a member just wanted something outrageous, but let's don't go there.
I think one of the main things that I see at private clubs is people just kind of expect to show up at any time and be able to get a lesson. And that's not, I don't know if you see that in a public facility or not, but definitely at the club level, it just seems like, are you available now? And it's like, no, we're booked. So that'd be one of the examples I can think of where it's like, no, sorry.
Yeah, it's tough. And I do think when you're at a private club, you pay for that expectation. So to an extent, you actually pay for that. But I think in the private club world, I think one of the keys that any club can do is set reasonable expectations. So that way the members don't have an unrealistic, there are golf courses that have no tee times. Mm-hmm. The members just show up when they want. But those are usually very, very pricey clubs. And they normally have 150 to under 200 members for the 18 holes. So for that, and if you're paying when I say a large fee, I mean when you're paying well into six figures and above six figures for initiation, okay, then the membership is small. You can kind of expect to walk in. Some places have no tee times. There are tennis centers at private tennis clubs that have no reservations. But again, your dues and the amount of money you spend in dues will generally be equal with what your expectations should be.
Yeah. And I think that's why, at least from what I've seen, it seems like directors like to be overstaffed more so than understaffed. Always overestimate because you don't want to turn people away and you want to make sure you're providing good service, even if it's kind of last minute.
Absolutely, Jen. And, a good example, when I was at Ibis for several years before I left, I would oversee the fitness center, the spa, which is really funny that I ever ran a spa, but the spa, the aquatics operation. And it wouldn't be uncommon for us to just overstaff the spa just so that we had providers there in the event somebody wanted something. But again, their dues would help subsidize a lot of the staffing expenses. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And can you think of any constant challenges that you've seen as a director? What has been like a recurring theme that you see from place to place that doesn't seem to change as a director?
I think just continuing to meet people's expectations is always a challenge because our world now is a little bit different in that people really value their time. And so I think being able to program and create programs so that, people can have what they want when they want. I think that's kind of a reoccurring theme. I think what we're about to find out, we know now, but it's going to be even more challenging is we need more coaches. Yeah. I think we definitely, from talking to my peers and talking to other directors, staffing is very, very difficult, and it's a challenge. And being able to get good new coaches, I mean, the statistic about I think like 5 years ago when we were talking about the average age of a coach or of a certified pro, that age is like at 50 or over, which means that a lot of coaches and a lot of pros and directors are getting old. They're getting ready to leave the industry.
Yeah.
So we need a lot of new young coaches. And we also need, I think if the pandemic showed us one thing, we really need lots and lots and lots of entry-level coaches. And from time to time, I've used this phrase and that we need to rethink coaching a little bit, and that not every coach needs to be a tennis director. Not every coach wants to be a tennis director. Thank God, because there are not that many director jobs to go around.
Yeah.
But we need people that are really good at teaching entry-level tennis, red ball, orange ball, beginners, because again, going back to the pandemic, we had a huge influx of people who wanted to learn to play tennis.
Yeah.
So during the pandemic, you probably saw it everywhere you went. When you close all the Orange Theories and you close all the LA Fitnesses and you close all the Gold's gyms, people are just dying to get exercise and they want to do something outside. So, boy, if there was ever apparent that we were short on entry-level coaches, it was them.
Do you have any theories as to why that is? Why do we? It's like almost like we're missing a certain age range of coaches.
I think it's a couple of things. One is I think we need to elevate the role of tennis coaches and tennis pros, and we need to make certification and education for coaches. We need to promote that better so that way people actually want to become coaches and they want to be better trained. I think if you're better trained and you understand how to teach a little better, I think you find it more rewarding. I think that when you're an entry-level coach or you're a new coach, I think that you need to have good mentors. I'm not sure that we have the best mentor system in place. And I think it's really important that these career paths are kind of touted in the industry as we need new coaches, and this is how you could get involved in it. This is how you could start. And this is how we could nurture you along the pathway of finding a way to make a very good living being a full-time tennis coach. I think we're missing something there.
Yeah. I think also I'm surprised that there's not a lot of former players that were playing, try to play on the pro tour that go on to coaching. There's not a lot, to be honest. And that's a little bit surprising to me. I think that there's something missing there where maybe, I don't know if the WTA, ATP can provide some certification or some coaching information for some players that not necessarily your top 200 players, but there's a lot of players in the world. So I think there's definitely something missing there.
Yeah, Jen, we've tried to dig into that a little bit, and we've thought about it as an industry when I was with the USPTA, and we went, geez, why aren't more former tour pros interested in teaching tennis as they leave? And I think the brain type of being an elite player really lends itself to being a little bit selfish about your own game. You tend to focus on how you can get better. I think you focus on how to compete yourself. And there are a number of tour pros that go out and become good coaches, and they typically wind up coaching other tour pros. But
yeah.
I don't know that the mindset that it takes to become a top 10 or top 20 or top 30 player in the world is necessarily the mindset that you would have to be a great tennis coach for someone who's just learning. You need a lot of patience.
Right.
You need to understand.
It's completely different.
It's completely different. And then you learn it's not always about you. I mean, I could tell you that I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with a number of former tour pros that I've witnessed be excellent coaches to entry-level players as well as tour pros. I mean, Jay Berger is about as good as it gets and he took my role at Ibis. But, he can bring it if you're Riley Opelka and you're in the top 20 in the world. And he also can be just as nurturing and just as focused if you're a lady or a senior man that's 3.0. You learn. The Gullicksons were also very, very great. I mean, Tom Gullickson he's one of those fellows that played the tour for a number of years with his twin brother, and they were great players, but they also started out as instructors and coaches, so they understand coaching. Kathy Rinaldi's another one that, while she runs the elite program and she runs the Tour Pro program and she has all the credentials as a Billie Jean King Cup captain, I've also done clinics with her where I've watched her be just as empathetic with somebody who's learning. So I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I'm saying those instances tend to be rare.
I agree with that. I think I've seen the same. But you would think it would be such a natural transition, especially for someone that obviously, I think to get to that level, you have to be passionate about the game. So it's just interesting. I don't know. It's kind of funny to me. But do you have any advice for young pros, whether they come from a professional playing background or college or didn't even get to that level? Any advice for someone that just started their teaching career?
I would, and I would probably, and I go back to what would I tell my, I'm 65 now. What would I tell my 25-year-old self about getting into the business? And I would, number one, tell them, check your ego at the door. It's not about you anymore. It's not about how well you play. And it's not always about how well you think you teach. It's about how well you can help others learn. And I think a lot of young coaches will say, well, I told them what to do. I mean, I couldn't. And teaching is really about giving, and it's about helping people get better. So while you might think you gave the perfect lesson, if it didn't connect with the student, then, maybe it wasn't perfect. I would say, number one, realize that it's not about you anymore. It's all about how well you can connect with your student. The other tip I'd give a young coach, any young coach, is never stop learning. Go to every convention or online seminar or network with every other coach that you can, because I would share with you that I'm 65, but I still pride myself in trying to be a lifelong learner. If I can sit with three other coaches and pick their brain on whether what they do with programming at their club or how do you handle this issue with your ladies teams, I don't think you ever stop learning. And I think sometimes you get a little better and you get a little taste of success when you're young and you forget that you can always learn from everyone else. Those would be two things I would certainly make sure that a young coach hopefully never forgets.
Well, that's great advice. And what about any advice for a pro that's maybe been teaching for a decade or so and now are wanting to become a director?
Wow. I spoke on kind of that topic in New England years ago when I was at the Chatham Bars Inn in the USPTA conference. I think you have to develop other skills other than just teaching. I think you now have to develop some HR skills. You have to develop some accounting skills. You have to develop management skills. And you also have to develop business and, for lack of a better word, visionary skills. Because what you'll have to do now is, as the director, you'll learn that you're one step removed. You've got coaches that'll help the students, and you begin to take on more and more the role of coaching the coaches and trying to help them succeed. And I've seen a lot of directors in their first job, if they try to grab the spotlight all the time, it's really not about them anymore. It's about how well you can build a team, how well you can provide programs, whether or not your desk people are good, your court maintenance people. You've got to really have if you're going to be especially today, because if you're going to have a staff and you're going to be at a club or a facility where you're going to have a lot of people, you have to realize that while, like Jen and you and myself, if we're directors, you probably understand that it's not always about how well people like and respect me. It's how well people like and relate to my staff. And having a great staff is really that's the key.
Right.
And don't think you know everything. Engage your staff, ask them questions, talk to them a lot. I always jokingly say, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I need to find a new room. Because I don't think I'm that bright. And I really need to hear from other people and get their opinions.
Yeah. And I've talked to some directors on the podcast too about hiring and how challenging that can be, right? That's the key to success, is to have a good team, right? And it's sometimes it can be tough to hire and to retain like really good people around you. Throughout your career, I'm sure you've had you have hired and maybe hopefully not fired too many people, but
we fired a few.
How is that for you, and how did you usually go about it? Was that more through your network of pros that you've known, or did you usually do like a national search? How did you find pros?
It's still a challenge, and it always will be a challenge. I generally try to hire for the attitude, and then I try to train the skill. It's nice when you have somebody that's everything you want coming right out of the blocks, but that's not always the case. I'd much rather just make sure that whoever I hire has a very good service mentality. They have a really good teamwork mentality. And if they have decent tennis skills, I can teach them the rest. I can sit and work with just about anybody on how I want a drill done, what progressions I want. But at a lot of facilities, I really want to hire for the attitude and train for the skill, because they could come in with great skills, but if they're not team players and they don't have the right attitude of service, it's going to be really tough. It's going to be really, really tough. And in my world, we can tolerate mistakes. You mess up, you fess up, you clean up, you move on. That's it. Everybody makes mistakes, certainly myself included. I've made countless mistakes, but you want to have the right person and the type of person that will, they understand, they want to learn, they want to get better, and, teamwork and good attitudes, the best attributes I can find.
I think you're spot on that, because, and that goes back to sometimes, not always, but sometimes just because you're talking to an amazing player, it doesn't mean that they're going to be service oriented and good with people. I wanted to ask you about racket sports, and now with pickleball, padel, like all the different sports happening now, it looks like it's really changing the industry. Do you have any thoughts for this change that's happening in our industry?
I don't really have any thoughts about it. I just think it's a reality, and we need to be able to embrace change, because everything changes. I think the role of the racket sports professionals is certainly going to change. I think if you have an ability to introduce other racket sports, I think that only enhances your career. For decades and decades, the model of a lot of the clubs up in the Northeast has been you teach tennis in the summer, and that's your summer job, and then you switch to platform tennis in the winter. That's always been the model. And for the ones that don't teach platform tennis in the winter, they either go down south and work on tennis or do tennis indoors. And then you have a totally new person that delivers that sport. I think it does enhance people's job opportunities if you're able to teach platform tennis or pickleball or paddle tennis or padel. I don't think it's a matter of having an opinion on it as much as it is just embrace the change, because it's occurring. And, again, and I've heard it both ways. And, at this point, I've never been to a tennis conference where the topic of pickleball didn't come up, and it didn't just monopolize the entire conversation.
Oh, gosh.
and change the whole dialogue. And I think pickleball players are very passionate about it. And, and that's wonderful. It's great because it does get people into a racket sport that maybe never would have played tennis. Tennis to me it's a great sport, but it's a commitment, and it's very rewarding, but you do need to have a commitment to learn how to play and learn how to play it right. Pickleball is a little bit easier to learn once you can figure out the scoring, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. Once you get the scoring down, and there are a number of nuances, with the dink and coming in and all of that. I think there are definitely opportunities to introduce pickleball and to have it played. And I think there's a place for pickleball. I think there's a huge opportunity with paddle and padel. I think that's going to be the next, tsunami, because I think padel, in a way, is the best combination of both of those sports. You can learn it easy, like pickleball. The scoring is actually much simpler because it's tennis scoring. You can learn it quickly, and it takes you a long time to master it. So I think that's going to be probably the next. At least that's what I'm seeing, and I'm thinking that domestically, as soon as these padel courts start going in and becoming more popular, you have the economy of space that you have in pickleball. It's played on a shorter area. The surface is pretty uniform. It's easy on your legs. Yeah. But no, I think diverse racket sports is going to be here for a while, and I think so too. I think sometimes tennis makes the mistake of trying to be too much like pickleball, right? When you see people introducing programs with shorter courts and shorter rackets and compression balls, there's always a way to teach people to play tennis with compression balls. I think our sport's pretty good, and it's kind of withstood the test of time. I think we just need better coaches teaching entry-level people how to play tennis before we start trying to retrofit a sport to match a sport that already exists.
Right. You mean in competition-wise?
Yeah, we don't have to go in competition with pickleball. Yeah. People are going to play pickleball. They probably always will. But I think tennis is a pretty good sport. I think tennis will always be a good sport, and it'll always be something that people will be able to play. But it does require that you understand how to rally, you understand basic technique, you understand basic movement. I don't think tennis is broken at all. I think sometimes it just needs to be promoted and introduced better.
Yeah, I think so too. And promoted, I think, being the key word, because to me, it's like rackets, all these different racket sports, are creating more play opportunities. I think it's just a matter of time before we start seeing pickleball, maybe padel at the college level or high school level. So, it's creating more play opportunities for people. And I think as a tennis professional, you got to take advantage of it. And it's going to be more opportunities for you to make money, to learn different skills, and to just grow as a professional. I think I definitely think it's a positive thing. The only time that I get really annoyed, and I think it's because I'm a tennis player and, my heart is in tennis, is when I see public tennis courts turned into public pickleball courts. That's an issue for me personally, because, especially being in Florida, there's so many places that I go to hit every now and then. And, there's like half of the courts, all of a sudden they're gone to pickleball. And that's when I'm kind of...
Yeah, I'm with you. I get that too, because, but in all fairness, I come back to the fact that, and I'll use my facility as an example. We have 21 clay tennis courts, and they're busy all morning. Yeah. We have 21 courts. They're busy at night. You'll come in at night, in between juniors and programming and just working people, they're all playing. I really haven't seen too many full tennis courts converted into pickleball courts. Typically, when courts get converted to pickleball courts, they might be played on a couple of times a day at most, or they might be used for a junior academy in the afternoon. I think, and I've had this spirited debate with other people. I don't think pickleball is tennis's problem. I think sometimes tennis is tennis's problem. If you do entry-level programs and you get people playing and you program so that the people that play can play more, I think pickleball finds its own home, and it finds standalone pickleball courts, because I've talked to pickleball players who don't like playing on a tennis court. They don't like the dimensions of it. They certainly find it difficult to play over the slightly higher net with blended lines. They'd much rather have their own product. And I think they should. I don't always know that if you fill your tennis courts and you program your tennis courts properly, and put good entry level coaches and program a pathway for tennis new players to become frequent players, I don't think you have to worry about pickleball. Pickleball can grow organically on its own without encroaching into tennis courts. I happen to be in the minority on that at times, but that's okay. That's my story. I wouldn't be the first time I zigged when others zagged, so I'm okay.
It's okay. I mean, we can have different opinions. I think
Right.
that there's
Absolutely.
always value to that. And people
Yes.
forget that nowadays. It's like, oh, if you don't agree with me, I can't talk to you. No, like,
Right.
let's go. I'm here.
Yeah.
I want to hear why you believe that,
Yeah. I mean, I've had some of my best conversations with people who think polar opposite of me on a number of things, not just racket sports, but I'm always curious and I want to hear their point of view and I need to understand their perspective. And whether I agree with it or not, at the end of the day, sometimes it just helps me reestablish why I feel the way I feel about something. And sometimes I can just change my mind and think,
Exactly.
what? You're probably right. That maybe that is a good point.
Exactly. So what's it like to be president of the USPTA? I didn't realize that you were president for both USPTA National and Florida. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, Florida was great. Being the president of USPTA Florida, you probably know a lot of the people that were on the board back then. I mean, Lynn Samard, who does searches now, and Frank Swope, who's a very, they're both very dear friends. Kevin McCarthy, Paula Shebb. There's so many people that were on the board when I was on the Florida board, and then as I became the president, I had my dear friend Richard Cinnabar, and there were a lot of people that I got to serve on the board with. I found being the Florida president incredibly rewarding because, I think that's how I met you actually the first time. It might have been at a Florida meeting where we had good Florida conferences and a lot of fun and good camaraderie. I really enjoyed that. I guess when I was the Florida president, that might have been toward the height of the Grand Prix, that we had tournaments and we really prided ourselves on doing conventions for the Florida coaches that were just as good, if not at times better than the national convention. I mean, in Florida, we have so many talented speakers down here between, at one point we had Nick Bollettieri, we had Rick Macy, we had Andy Brandy coaching at Florida. I mean, we had so many great coaches just in Florida that our conventions were as good or better than a lot of the national conventions. So I really enjoyed I enjoyed the camaraderie. I enjoyed the people I got to know, and I enjoyed feeling like I was making tennis a little better for the coaches in Florida. As the national president, I never expected ever that I would be the national president for the USPTA. I mean, if you told me that when I got into the teaching business, because I got certified in, I think, 84 up in Stowe, Vermont. And if somebody had told me that, it's one day you're going to be USPTA president, I would have thought, oh, yeah, right. That's pretty far-fetched.
You got the wrong guy.
Yeah, I know. So I really enjoyed it. It was kind of a natural progression. When I finished as the Florida president, I was asked to apply for the board, and I applied for the board and got selected. And being on the board and eventually becoming the president was a huge honor. I was there at a time where there was a lot of stuff going on. We were in an office building in Houston, and they were about to build the headquarters in Lake Nona, and we had to decide if we wanted to stay in Houston, Texas, and stay in a very large building and we had some pretty major decisions to make at that time. We had to discuss whether or not we wanted to remain landlords and have an 80,000 square foot building that we leased out about 70% of it, or whether we wanted to build a standalone building in Lake Nona right next to the governing body. And at the time, I was a big proponent of we need to be in Lake Nona, because if we're going to be an association of teaching pros and we're going to be the headquarters, why wouldn't we want to be next to the governing body? And why wouldn't we want access to 100 tennis courts and have access to the brains at player development and community tennis and be closer to that? and have 2 hard courts in our backyard in Houston. So after a lot of debate, we eventually made that move, and we built our headquarters, and John Embry was at the time the new CEO. So we made that move. And the other thing that came up while I was president was the hot issue of continuing education. And, at that time, our education, our mandatory education consisted of take a test once and pay your dues for life, and you're a member. And we always wrestled with, well, as a coach that goes to no conventions, has no education, doesn't go online, doesn't really work on their skill, is that coach as good as a coach that spends hours trying to get some type of education? So we came up with the first mandatory education policy, where we went around to the different divisions and we decided, look, we're gonna move forward on this, and if we lose members, we're really sorry, but we're okay losing some members as long as we elevate the standard and make it more important that you become a better educated teaching pro. Along with that, we obviously had to step up our game and have better online education, because not everybody can travel to a conference. I'm certainly now I'm in a world where 10 or 9 of my coaches cannot take off and go to a world conference or even a state convention. So we have to bring education to them.
I loved it during COVID when it was on Zoom, because I could actually go. I could actually see.
Right. And there's a lot of good coaching out there online. I mean, Jorge Capistani and Scott Schultz and RSU, Racket Sports University. I mean, they have great content. They have, if you were trying to teach an entry-level coach how to run a practice or how to run a high school team, boy, the content there is second to none. Mm-hmm. And, everybody's going to have to step up their game and get more online education. But I guess those were the 2 things when I was USPTA president that I was most proud of at the time, that we were able to move a headquarters out of Houston. The building was terrific. There wasn't anything wrong with the building. We just thought that it would be better to be in tennis, at a tennis area. And then that education that we did get past, and now we still have with us today. So those were kind of 2 things that I would say were heavy lifts. Yeah. And those are heavy lifts, because to change and have somebody to be able to tell a coach that's been at a club for 30 years and doesn't need his USPTA to maintain his job, that, you really need to get safe play verified, and you need to get a background check, safe play verified, and safe play trained. And you've got to have X number of education. And even though we know you don't need it personally for your job, it makes a good statement that as an industry, as a trade association, all of our coaches have done it. So those are heavy lifts, but worthwhile. Yeah.
So did you work, were you ever like in the offices, or?
No, I was a volunteer. Hey, thank God, Jen, that my club in West Palm Beach was my GM understood how much, when I became the USPTA president, he understood the time constraints that would have. And I think the people that suffered the most were probably my family, because it seemed like for about 2 years there, every weekend off, I was driving up to Lake Nona from West Palm Beach to go to some meeting or, kind of check in with John. And so I was there once a week as a stretch, but there was a stretch there where I was certainly there for a meeting at least once a month.
I can imagine it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? It's a lot of work, but thank God I was a volunteer. I wasn't paid staff. So a lot of what I was doing was just kind of offering expertise and helping and trying to, a lot of people say, oh, you're the USPTA president, you must have made a lot of money. No, that's a volunteer job. You get travel expenses paid for when you have to go somewhere and represent USPTA, but you're a volunteer, and it's not unlike a lot of boards that you might serve on. While you're not paid staff, you have to always trust staff and let them do the day-to-day, and not unlike a club. Right. Mm-hmm. Your club has a board of directors. Yeah. And the board of directors really needs to focus on governance and vision. and let the staff handle day to day. Let the staff worry about, one of a very smart person in the club industry once said, if your board member's wife is in the chef's office giving them her recipe for soup, you're way, 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 way off the rails.
That's great. And what about USTA Florida? Is that something you've already started?
Actually, I'm the president-elect. So following Phil Girardi's term, I take over as president. And again, I guess I'm a serial volunteer because when I was approached back in the day by Doug Booth about whether I'd volunteer to serve on the section board as a director at large, what we were trying to do, what the USTA Florida section was trying to do was trying to bridge the gap between the coaches and the teaching pros. So we actually did a little deal, or did an agreement with our Florida section where we said, look, instead of the Florida USTA section trying to figure out what the teaching pros want, and the teaching pros trying to figure out what the Florida section USTA people want, since we're all basically trying to do the same thing, we're all trying to grow tennis and get more people in the courts.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be a good idea? And I'll credit Bob Fender with this one, who you probably know. Bob Fender came up with the idea of, or the concept of, hey, why don't we have a person that's a liaison to both boards? And over a period of time, it kind of evolved where the section board now has, thankfully, several teaching pros, coaches, directors at public parks actually on their board. So Phil Girardi, who's the president, is he's in St. Pete, running a public tennis center, right? You probably know him. Rita Dotson is up in the Panhandle, and she's at a club running tennis there. So I think, my role at the USTA Florida section is really one to just be a volunteer. I'll be the lead as president here in a couple of years, but really just to try to focus on how we grow tennis and, how everybody works together, how the teaching pros work with the volunteers and work with the staff. And I'm really excited about that role coming up, Jen, because I think we've had some really good people on our board. Clark Higgs, who left the board, was the past president. He was exceptional in finance. He was in the banking business. Dana Andrews is an attorney from Tampa. She was our president before Phil. So I think we've got a great blend of people that are incredibly talented in different ways. I think if you had a board that consisted of, 9 teaching pros, I think it would probably be a little disjointed. But if you have a few teaching pros and a few people that are, an attorney, a finance person, I think it's the perfect blend of talent, which I think you need on a highly functioning board.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I got to ask you, you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Answer good, I'm going to.
But I don't know, because I just noticed this myself. I was not aware that, I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like the USPTA and the USTA broke up, and now the USTA is with the PTR. What the heck is going on with that?
I can only give you my perspective, and my perspective, there might be people that disagree with it, but I think they didn't really break up. I think the USPTA realizes how important the USTA is. Hopefully the USTA realizes how important the USPTA and the PTR are to grow tennis. Yeah. So I think the perceived split up was really more over the accreditation process. And the USTA, the governing body, was not going to get in the certification business, but they really wanted to elevate the standards. And the USPTA and the PTR want to elevate the standards. I mean, I don't think anybody could say, yeah, we want the standards to be really low. We want anybody that just picks up a racket to become a coach. Right. I think the problem is, and one of the challenges is, when you have 2 associations that are certifying pros, they're going to be in competition with one another for entry-level coaches and any coach that wants to be certified. I think competition doesn't always mean a race to the top. I mean, when you compete for members, you tend to want to have members. So I don't think raising the standards is always in the best interest of that model. So, yeah, it's a little rocky now and it's a little disjointed. I don't think it's going to be that way forever.
I was just a little surprised because, I mean, they're right next to each other.
The USPTA were the first group to get accredited.
Yeah.
And then I think it's safe to say that the accreditation, at least from the USPTA's perspective, the value of being accredited did not meet their expectations.
Yeah.
And so they made the decision to withdraw from the accreditation until certain things were changed. I think it got framed as a simple safe play, like the USPTA is going to lose members because they're going to require safe play. I think both associations are going to lose members if they require safe play, but until everybody gets in the same boat and rows in the same direction and says, we're going to require all the coaches in this country that we can to be background checked, better educated, better trained, and safe play. I mean, that is one thing that everybody should feel good about, driving a stake in the ground and saying, look, if you're coaching kids or coaching adults, safe play is a pretty good training to have. That being said, I'm sure there would be people that would want to debate on that, whether or not, coaches need safe play if you've been at your club for X number of years. I think safe play is very important. I thought it 5 years ago when we applied for accreditation, and I think most credible coaches would say it's something that we need. I think we're going through a really rocky time right now because we need to get three groups in a room to knock this out and to figure out how's the best way to get more coaches, better trained coaches, and most importantly, if we're going to keep them in the business, their jobs have to be better. So everybody needs to focus on the things that they can do and support one another. And at the end of the day, again, I keep coming back to we all want the same thing. There's not a group that wouldn't agree with the concept of we need new coaches, we need more coaches, we need better trained coaches. They need to be really, really good at teaching entry-level tennis. We need to be flooding public parks with the best coaches that we can find, and we need to be coming up with creative ways to make their jobs better so they want to stay in the business.
Yeah.
That's coming at you from a 65-year-old who's seen a lot and seen it from a number of different angles. And I really do understand everybody's position, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
I just think that we need to stop thinking about what our own self-interest are and think about what's good for the sport. And I'm optimistic that will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before I
it's
retire.
Just like when we're at a club, right? You have your members that are self-serving.
Right.
And then you have your members that kind of have a better understanding of the bigger picture. And it's just about just that, right? Having the big picture in mind and looking out for the growth of the sport, which is what we all want at the end of the day.
You're wise beyond your years, young lady.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't know about that. I don't know if I can agree with that. But before you go, I did want to ask you, my last question I ask everybody is, what has been the Grand Slam moment and the double bagel moment of your tennis career? It can be your tennis teaching career since you've been teaching for so long.
Wow. I don't think I really have a Grand Slam moment. I think I've just, in general, been really, really blessed to be in this business for as long as I have. I love tennis. I loved tennis when I was a kid. I got the bug early on. I really enjoyed being around it. And I just feel really, really blessed because I always had a little bit of an acumen for business. And I feel like I was better than, at least in my 20s, better than a lot of my peers at understanding programs and understanding how to deliver good service. I don't have a real single solitary Grand Slam moment, but I would say that in my career, I've just been incredibly blessed that I'm 65 and I haven't had to do anything but tennis. If I didn't love my job so much now, I'd retire and spike it in the end zone and say, hey, I won. But there are a lot of things, as you can tell, with tennis politics, governing bodies, and working with sections and USPTA that I think I still, maybe have a relevant perspective that somebody may or may not want to hear. I just think I've been incredibly blessed to spend my whole life working with great people and having great relationships and meeting a lot of people that I really, really have enjoyed, and doing it with a sport that I think is the greatest sport in the world. And I'm just, incredibly, incredibly lucky.
Yeah. And what about a double bagel moment? Anything you want to share?
Double bagel moment. Is that like a really good moment? Like a time that you did something really, really good?
No, double bagel means bad.
Oh, double bagel. Oh my gosh.
Like, oh no.
You know what? I honestly think I could fill a whole hour with double bagel moments of things I've done. And as I always tell people, I'm very lenient when a staff makes a mistake, because boy, oh boy, I've done like a million of them. I mean, one time I had two big bonehead moments in the same tournament. I was hosting the champions event, right? When they used to have the Prudential Beach. Actually, it wasn't Pru Beach back then. I think it was at the Boca Resort, and I want to say it was Corral. But we had a big event with Bjorn Borg and Jimmy Connors playing, and I did two things. Like, have you ever heard of Murphy's Law? Right? Like, what can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible moment. Well, I've developed Chuck's Law. And Chuck's Law, Murphy was way too damn optimistic. I mean, I could tell you, we were actually staking off a parking lot outside of the site. And I said, okay, well, you got to get this done. Hurry up and get it done. And somebody said, well, we've got to be careful because we have to do this and that. And anyway, I kind of pushed it through, and right on the border of the tennis center complex, I said, yeah, go ahead. It's not going to hurt anything. And somebody drives a stake down into a water main. So my clay tennis courts had no water for like a day and a half while we were trying to figure out where the water main went. The other bright one, did double bagel moment. This was great. We built a stadium, right? So picture this. We're building I believe it was a 3,500 seat stadium. And we knew that we were going to have more seats to sell. So, I'm a business guy. I'm smart. So I'm working with the tournament director. And I said, no problem. We can put in, look, there's the layout. Look, we can get another 150 box seats in here. And this is how we'll do it. So, like every other place I've ever worked and designed, which really worked out pretty well for the most part, whether we put tennis courts this way or a shop this way. So I added, I want to say like 90 extra box seats. And I was so proud of myself. I thought, oh man, Chuck, you really got it together. So we build the new box seats, and 2 days before the tournament, my maintenance guy comes up to me and goes, Chuck, how are we going to get the rolling machine into the court? And I looked and I I built, through the area, so they couldn't get I couldn't get a rolling machine into the old Heron roller. I couldn't get the rolling machine into my court. So I'm just, like my saying, you mess up, you fess up, clean up, you move on. We cut a little hole through a fence and peeled it back, and we weren't going to get the fence. The bleacher company was not coming back to redo the bleachers. That's for sure. So we pivoted and figured it out. But oh no, too many double bagel moments to mention. I mean, I've done some real bonehead stuff.
You wear too many hats, but engineer is not one of them.
Engineer. No, that's the ironic thing. Engineer, I'm normally pretty good because I'm usually pretty good at sitting there and problem solving and figuring out efficient use of space. But boy, did I blow that one. But I've had my share of double bagels. And then you get back up and you bounce back, and don't let them kill you.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know we've already been talking for an hour, but thank you so much for taking the time to do this and all your volunteer hours. That is unbelievable. I can't even imagine how many hours you volunteered to the game.
Jen, thank you so much. I think when I met you, when was it? 15 years ago at a conference? Probably don't remember.
Something like that.
You were a relatively new pro, and you might have been in the Florida U30.
Yeah, that was when the U30 first started.
Okay, that's when the U30 first started. But I will tell you, I'm pretty good at identifying talent, because I turned to somebody and I said, that young lady's going to be really good in this business because she's sharp and she's got a great personality. And no, she's going to do very, very well. And I was absolutely right. So congrats on your podcast and all your success at your clubs and everything. And at some point, you're going to have to come visit me down at the Village of Wellington.
Yes, absolutely. At the Wellington. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chuck. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions for me, you can email me directly at vidatennispodcast@gmail.com. I love hearing back from listeners. Check out other episodes with leaders in the tennis industry and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We have some great ones coming up. See you next time.